Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited to be here. I really like it as well that the group is not too big, so I hope we can exchange thoughts and experiences. It would be really great to hear of your work and how you are doing everything. Sorry?
I don't think you can unplug the computers. Yeah.
Ah, there it is. Okay. I'm not sure because I didn't understand anything except for my name, what Kristen told you, but I'm Julie. I am a researcher at University College and University in Belgium, in Ghent. I have a master's degree in educational sciences and sexology, and I'm doing research for over 10 years, nearly 15 years, on women and substance use. So my focus is on trauma and gender responsive or gender transformative treatment for women. I recently also started to be very intrigued by the holistic approach and the body approach, like taking into the body into the treatment. So I'm also a trauma-sensitive yoga facilitator, and I'm trained in ACT as well. I also train prison keepers, how do you say it in English? Professionals in prisons on trauma-informed care, especially for people working with women, incarcerated women. So, let me see. Okay. So why do we need a gender-responsive approach? I would like to take you shortly to the reason why we need a gender-responsive approach or policy for women. And what does it actually look like, a gender-responsive policy for women? And from there, we're going to take it to the core of today, trauma-informed care. So before we dive in, I want to take a moment to talk about why this topic really matters. Learning about trauma-informed care isn't just important for the people you support, it's also important for you. You are the key connection for women. You are the key connection, you are really for everyone who comes into the system, not only for women. And that role can be intense, it can be heavy, it can not always be appreciated. And that's exactly why caring for yourself is as important as caring for your clients. So yes, the system has a responsibility to take care of you or to look after you, but you also have the power to look after yourself and your colleagues. This training is meant for both sides, for patients, or this lecture is meant for both sides, for patients and clients, because a trauma-informed approach helps prevent re-traumatization and promotes safety, choice, and collaboration. But it's also for you as a professional, because working in a trauma-informed way can create safer, more supportive work environments. So this isn't just about how you care for others, it's also about how you care for yourself. So before we go on, let's do a tiny check-in together. Nothing intense, just a quick raise your hand. I'm curious to see what the room recognizes. So raise your hand if your work feels meaningful and rewarding, but also heavy and overwhelming at times. Okay, thank you. And next, so raise your hand if your work feels meaningful. If you ever felt unsure how to respond when someone shuts down or becomes overwhelmed. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That being said, I want to shortly take you through some insights on why we need a gender-responsive policy for women. Before we dive into trauma-informed care, let's see what is trauma-responsive approach. There are definitely some biological differences between men and women. But research shows that these differences are also differences between men and women when it comes to access to health and care and services, whether in addiction care, mental health care, prisons, or broader social services. Let's have a closer look at these differences. When we look at treatment settings, we see that women often face specific barriers and specific experiences that many mainstream programs simply weren't designed for. So when we talk about making a service more women-friendly, we're really talking about addressing those gendered barriers. The things women are more likely to encounter, the risks they carry, the roles they hold, and the ways they've been treated, both in society and in care systems. Now, of course, many of these adaptations, like trauma-informed care, are helpful for everyone: men, women, and people of all gender identities. Trauma doesn't discriminate, and supportive, respectful care benefits all humans. But, and this is important, for women, the need for these adaptations is often stronger, more urgent, and often different in nature. So we see that they have different social expectations, different stigma, double stigma as well. They have a higher vulnerability to sexual and interpersonal violence. There are practical barriers like childcare, caregiving of someone in the family, and there are psychosocial and biological differences. I might skip these and go to this. Women are not a homogeneous group. And before anything else, this is really important to stress. There's enormous diversity across age, culture, class, sexuality, neurodiversity, migration background, health status, and so on. A gender-responsive approach isn't about making assumptions. It's about recognizing patterns while staying attentive to each woman's unique story and context. That's the foundation we need before we move forward. And what about men? A lot of what I've just described is not exclusive to women. Men also struggle with trauma. They also carry, Yeah, I'm just not going to touch it, sorry. They also carry caregiving responsibilities. They also deal with trauma, and they also need a safe, respectful, accessible care. In fact, trauma-informed practice, respectful communication, and privacy are really basic conditions for all clients, regardless of gender. But the context in which men live and the stigma they face often looks different. So even in services designed for men, there may be specific needs we have to keep in mind. First, many men experience a strong resistance to showing vulnerability. Traditional masculine expectations can make it harder for men to ask for help, to talk about feelings, or to admit they're struggling. Second, the social stigma is different, where women may be judged as not a good mother or not a good woman or wife. Men often feel pressure to be strong, self-sufficient, the provider of the family. And substance use can be seen as a sign of weakness, almost like a failure in their expected role. But also, men can absolutely experience trauma as well: childhood abuse, violence, war trauma, and they deserve approaches that speak to their experiences too. Approaches that recognize that trauma can take in many forms depending on the person. And fourth, men tend to use healthcare services less often. There's still this belief that a real man fixes his own problems, which can lead to undertreatment or seeking help only when things are really very serious. So while today we're focusing mainly on women, and for good reason, it's also important to remember that gender-responsive care can benefit everyone, including men and definitely also queer communities. The need just shows up differently depending on someone's social context, identity, and lived experience. So to bring this all together, the reason why we talk about women-responsive or women-friendly adaptations in addiction care, mental health care, social care, is because on average, women face different and often heavier barriers when trying to access help. That's the core of it. But this absolutely does not mean that men don't benefit from safe, respectful, trauma-informed treatment. Most of these principles are universal. They are simply what good care looks like for any human being. At the same time, men also deserve approaches that speak to their specific needs. For example, reducing shame and taboo around help seeking, normalizing the expression of emotions and vulnerability. So in short, gender-responsive care means paying attention to the unique needs of different groups, women, men, and queer communities, and translating those needs into the way we design and deliver our services. That way, every individual has the best possible chance to benefit from the support we offer. Okay, so knowing why we need a gender-responsive approach is the first step. the next question is, what does a gender-responsive approach look like? How do we translate this understanding into our services, into concrete actions? Let's take a moment to look at what a truly gender-responsive approach for women needs to include. Here you can see all the key components of a gender-responsive, women-centered approach. These elements work together like a puzzle to create services that truly meet women where they are and support their whole lives, not their problems. So we see that multidisciplinary and integrated care is one core element. We have to look at the women, not just to their problem, but like at every aspect of a woman that's being a mother, that's learning skills to parent, of course. She needs a job, she needs housing, she has a social network she has to take care of. So we have to like build a network around women. The second one is a supportive network, and then we're talking about peer support, we're talking about professionals that encourage, that support them. We're talking about family, rebuilding, restoring the family bonds. The holistic approach is another important element in the treatment of women. Holistic approach, what do we mean by this? There has to be attention for both the social aspect of recovery, for the spiritual, meaning-making aspect of recovery, for the mental aspect, for the soul of a woman, for the physical aspect. So we really have to look at a holistic approach here. Another important element is empowerment and recovery-oriented practice. It's important to work strengths-based. Professionals, but also women themselves, have to look at what are my strengths? What can I build on? What is my starting point? How can I move forward from that point? Practical support is another important issue because women often are responsible for childcare. So we need to provide childcare when we want women to go into recovery. Transportation is also a very important issue for women because sometimes in the neighborhood there are no facilities or services and they need transportation to get there. Gender composition is also an important issue for women. Do you want men in treatment for women or not? What do women want themselves? It's actually an NN question or an NN story here because women say, we like the safe space of a women-only treatment setting or service, but we also want to relearn how to build safe relationships with men. And what's more, or what's a better place to do that in the safe environment of treatment? So they want actually both. They want a safe space of women only, but they also want to involve men in their recovery process to be able to restore that feeling of I can build healthy relationships with men. And then psychoeducation and language, the way we frame things, the way we talk about things, talk to women is very important. And psychoeducation, of course, as well. Learning women what is going on in their body, what is going on in their brain, what are coping mechanisms, how can they build on those. And then, of course, what's really important today, trauma-informed care. These are all the important aspects. So to wrap up this part, a gender-responsive, women-friendly service in addiction care is one that creates safety, respect, and flexibility at every level. It responds directly to women's lived experiences and their specific needs. This means making thoughtful choices about the physical environment, the treatment approaches, the kind of support we offer, and the expertise of the team. When we consistently pay attention to the role of trauma, the impact of caregiving and parenting responsibilities, the weight of stigma, and the unique health and well-being challenges women face, we create a setting where women feel understood, supported, and truly welcome. And when women feel that, when they feel seen and when they feel safe, their chances for meaningful recovery grow enormously. So trauma-informed care it is. Let's start with the basics. What is trauma? The word trauma comes from Greek and literally means a wound or injury. When we talk about psychological trauma, we're really talking about an injury to the psyche. In recent years, we've come to understand that trauma isn't only about what happens to you, the event itself, it's also, and even more importantly, how you respond to that event, your reaction to the event. Trauma is the emotional reaction we have when something overwhelms us, when it exceeds our ability to cope. In that sense, trauma is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. But it's important to remember, people respond very differently to difficult events. Not everyone develops trauma after something shocking. An event becomes traumatic when a person doesn't have the internal or external resources to deal with it, when the experience completely floods their capacity to cope. A simple example, imagine you get bitten by a dog. It can be very scary, can be very nasty, it's unpleasant, it hurts. But when your mom comes to you and she comforts you and she takes care of the wound and she takes you in her arms and she comforts you, then that dog bite isn't necessarily going to be a traumatic event for you, because your basic sense of safety is intact, stays intact. Now, I'm giving away some piece of the most important thing that trauma prevention, or the most important aspect of trauma prevention and trauma recovery. Can you just take a moment for yourself and try to figure out, based on this example, what that is? What is, based on the example of the dog bite, one of the most important aspects of trauma prevention and trauma recovery? You can write it down, you can just remember it. I'm just going to take one moment because I noticed that it's not the latest version of my PowerPoint. I'm really sorry, but something is missing here. I can see, okay. Yes, here it is. There you go. Okay. So keep in mind what I just asked you. Now, when we think about trauma, many people immediately think of the classic examples like sexual abuse. But there are many other experiences that can be deeply traumatic as well. Think of terrorist attacks. Until recently, something that felt really far away, but they're coming closer and closer. Or large-scale floods, war, people fleeing conflict. These bigger stories of trauma are no longer abstract. They're part of our reality. We can think of trauma in a few broad categories. First, single incident trauma. This is related to one unexpected, overwhelming event like an accident, a natural disaster, a one-time assault, a sudden loss, or witnessing violence. Then there's complex or repeated trauma. This involves ongoing harm, such as chronic abuse, where a person often feels emotionally or physically trapped. Developmental trauma happens when babies, children, or young people under the age of 18 are exposed to ongoing or repeated harm early in life. This can include neglect, abandonment, physical or sexual abuse, etc. Because it often happens in a child's caregiving system, it disrupts the emotional attachments and developments of this child. Let's talk briefly about intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma happens when a trauma that hasn't been processed, things like sexual abuse, childhood neglect, war, or other severe experiences, gets passed down from one generation to another. You may not have lived through the trauma yourself, but you can still feel its impact. You might even experience symptoms that look and feel like trauma symptoms without knowing where they come from. Let me give you an example. Imagine a father who was abused by his own father when he was young. To survive that, he learned that it was safest to keep his feelings hidden and to stay in the background. That was his coping strategy. Now, today, his son grows up and finds it very difficult to talk about his emotions and feelings and thoughts. He never learned how to do that because his father couldn't show it. So the pattern continues even without anyone intending it. That's the essence of intergenerational trauma. The story begins in one generation, but the effects can echo through the next ones, unless there's place for healing and support. And finally, historical trauma. This is the impact of massive collective trauma experienced by a community over lifetimes and across generations. It's often caused by an oppressive, dominant group. We're talking about genocide, colonization, slavery, and war. So trauma can come from individual experiences, ongoing patterns, early childhood environments, or even the history of a whole community. Now, trauma affects people in many different ways, and it shows up across our whole system, in our emotions, relationships, in our body, in our behavior, and even in our thinking or in our thoughts. Let's see how it affects us emotionally. Trauma can leave you feeling too much or too little. Some people feel overwhelmed by intense emotions, sadness, shame, fear, anger, panic. Others feel numb, flat, or disconnected. Many people struggle with depression or feel hopeless, helpless, or worthless. How does it affect our relationships? Trauma can make it hard to trust others or to feel close to someone. It can affect sexual relationships. It can lead to fear of people or cause someone to withdraw or isolate themselves. It can also make it difficult to recognize unsafe situations, to find balance in giving and taking in a relationship, or it can create a pattern of constantly looking for someone to rescue you. How does it affect our body? Trauma can show up through flashbacks, reliving the experience, through images, sounds, smells, or physical sensations. It can also lead to sleeping problems, nightmares, headaches, nausea, pelvic pain, and other physical complaints. But it also affects our behavior. People may turn to self-harm, disordered eating, substance use, or risky sexual behavior, or, on the other side, avoid anything sexual altogether. Sometimes people may act out aggression or harm others. And finally, it affects our thinking. Trauma can affect concentration, memory, and clarity of thought. It can cause confusion or intrusive thoughts. In short, trauma touches every part of our life and of our body. Now let's have a look at trauma and our brain. First of all, our brain is built out of nerve cells or neurons that connect with each other. We have around 100 million of neurons or nerve cells in our head. When a child or even an adult learns something new, those neurons start firing together. That can happen because of something you see, something you smell, something you hear, any kind of sensory input. These connections become associations or pathways in our brain, and we can form an enormous number of them. We can have up to 3 trillion possible connections in our brain. A classic example is Pavlov's dog. The bell rings and the dog starts drooling. It's linked with food. These pathways grow and strengthen through stimulation. Every task we have to learn as we develop emotional skills, social skills, academic skills, is a form of learning. And the brain works a bit like a muscle. You have to train it. Imagine this. George and Susie want to strengthen their abs. Susie does 10 minutes of core exercises every day. George does one very intense hour of exercises in that 1 week. After a week, who will have made the most progress? Susie or George? Raise your hand if you think it's Susie. And raise your hand if you think it's George. Okay, yes, exactly, it's Susie, because regular, repeated practice works better for the body. Now let's flip it. Suppose I want to learn Chinese. This time, George practices 10 minutes of vocabulary every day, and Susie studies for 1 full hour once that week. After 1 week, who will speak better Chinese? Raise your hand if you think it's Susie. Raise your hand if you think it's George. Yes, exactly. Because for the brain, short and frequent practice is much more effective than one long session. So the brain is like a muscle, our body is like a muscle. They work in a similar way. So when we're teaching children, young people or adults, whether it's about emotions, whether it's about relationships or any other skill, it helps to remember that short, repeated learning moments are far more effective than one long occasional session. That's why, for example, weekly therapy sessions can sometimes be less impactful than short, more frequent contact. This should be a video, but I'm not sure. Do you know why it's not working? Wait, let me see. It should be a video playing, but... Ah, no. Can I connect, or do I have to connect with my phone?
Can you find it on the other computers? Or just connect through my phone? Yeah, you can.
Oh, let me try. Is there a
this one?
No.
Android. It's my phone. We try that. And now.
Or I can do it from my phone. It's okay.
It's here.
Do you have the password?
Yeah. You can see it here. Já. Já, en tölvan lesna ekki.
I need a password.
This one.
EX. Like this?
Let's try this.
Oh wow, what's going on? Wait. Is it not going to be too loud? See, it's too loud.
Sorry?
It's too loud.
Can you put the...
Try again?
Your... Here. Just put down the... Yeah, it's on highest. I think we should go... Try now.
Okay.
Okay, 20. Like this.
Why is it not trying? Oh wow, this is weird. I hear this.
No?
What's going on in the brain when you learn?
Okay.
A little bit.
In order to learn anything, whether it's math, foreign language, guitar, or how to dribble a basketball, you need to create sprinkled pathways in your brain. Think about shooting a free throw. Know that feeling you've got it down and don't even have to think about it? That's muscle memory. Here's the thing. Muscle memory lives in the brain, not the muscles do. Your brain controls everything your muscles do, and it does this by activating specific neural pathways for each and every movement. These are functional pathways, neurons working together to achieve a goal. Say you're learning how to shoot a free throw. If it's your first time doing it, you don't yet have a pathway for that movement in your brain. You need to create it. Let's use an analogy to look at what's happening in the brain during this time. When you're first learning, your brain is like a forest full of trees and dense foliage, with no clear pathway between point A and point B. As you learn the mechanics of shooting a free throw, you create a trail through the forest. Now you can shoot the free throw because you've created that pathway in your brain. But you probably don't make many shots because it's so new. The pathway isn't very clear yet. In order to improve your free throw, you need to refine and strengthen the free throw pathway in your brain. The way you do that is through practice. Practice gradually widens the trail through the trees, turning it into a dirt road between A and B. You're starting to get pretty good now. You're making more free throws than not. You don't have to think about the mechanics as much. That's because the pathway gets stronger after each practice rep. And you've done a lot of reps. With even more practice, the dirt road turns into a paved road connecting A and B, allowing the information to be transmitted at a faster rate. Now you're a 70% free throw shooter, and when you step up to the line, you don't even have to think about it. Eventually, with enough practice, what started as a trail has become a full-blown highway. Now you're a master, draining almost every free throw, and the movement is completely second nature. Scientists call this plasticity, and it's your brain's innate ability to create and strengthen connections between neurons. These connections are the path through the forest.
Okay. So I hope that makes it a little bit visual, makes it a little bit clearer how the pathways in our brain work. Now, another important piece of understanding trauma and the brain is the brain plasticity, the brain's ability to change. Let's start with established pathways. By the time someone is a teenager or an adult, many of their brain pathways, the routes their brain takes to respond or behave, are already well established. And that can be challenging because it means new habits are hard to build. You're not just deciding to do something different. Your brain literally has to build a new pathway. And you need to practice that new route often enough before it becomes strong enough to replace the old one. Let's think about trying to do a diet or trying to take on a healthier lifestyle. If earlier in life you always had the connection in your brain of, I'm hungry, okay, let's have fries or chips or whatever, and now you want to change that pathway, you're going to have to do a lot of fighting in your head. No, I have to take an apple. No, I have to take an orange or a yogurt. But when you try and do that, and when you continue to say, no, I'm not going to take fries or chips, I'm going to take an apple or something healthy, over time, you won't have to fight against that neural pathway because you're building a new pathway. The good news is there is something like brain plasticity that shows the example. Our brain can change. The cortex, the part responsible for learning, is actually quite flexible. Especially at a young age, we can still learn a lot, but the plasticity decreases over time. If someone has a stroke later in life, for example, they can often learn to walk or speak again. Maybe not exactly like before, but the brain can reorganize itself. Another example, when a family moves to a new country, the child, with a young, highly plastic brain, usually picks up the new language very quickly. The parents will learn it too, but more slowly and probably with an accent. They won't become as fluent as their child, but they can learn because the brain stays plastic throughout life. So it's really about offering the right input at the right time. When someone resists something, we often think they don't want this. They're doing this on purpose. But a more helpful question is, this isn't working for them, at least not at this moment. So what can we try differently? And one more key idea, both calmness and stress are contagious. Our nervous systems pick up on each other. Sorry. I don't know what this is, but it's just a short promotion film. I'm sure it's, I think it's over now.
At some point you said.
We're in the hospital room, she's sticky, and
Wait.
she's baby and all that stuff, and she's in the middle of crying.
Right. Okay.
And
It's not the
then-
beginning.
And I speak up, I start talking to her. And watch how she responds when she hears my voice. Okay, look, I'm right here. It's okay, it's okay. I'm right here, right here. We're doing just fine. It's okay. It's okay, I'm right here. Right here. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay, right here. That was pretty awesome. So check it. A few minutes later, the nurse starts working on her, puts her pamper on her, and I'm not saying anything, and she actually starts to cry again. Then I speak up, she hears my voice, and stops crying, like again. But I want you to notice what else happens after I tell her that I love her. Portland. Okay, it's good, it's good, it's good. I'm right here, I'm right here. I am right here. I love you, I love you, I love you. Yeah, I'm right here, I'm right here. It's okay, it's okay. That's just phenomenal. I'm like, whoa. Here's the thing. We'll always have times where we're not as comfortable, probably even to the point of tears, where life is just heavy. The key thing to do in those moments is to be still and listen for the Father's voice, because He is trying to talk to you. And I can tell you what He wants you to know is that He loves you. All you got to do is open your eyes. Happy Father's Day.
So here's a short video that illustrates this very beautifully. It shows how a calm brain is contagious. For example, when a parent talks soothingly to his baby during pregnancy, repeated calming input helps the baby associate that voice with safety and calm after birth. But dysregulation is contagious too. If a parent becomes overwhelmed or stressed, the baby often gets pulled into that state as well. In the video, the baby identifies the father as the person who can calm him down. But in families dealing with difficult or unsafe situations, with stress, fear, or unpredictability, when a baby cries, they are going to associate that person, the father or the mother, with stress, with fear, with dysregulation. So when a baby cries or has uninterrupted nights, when there is stress in the home situation, we often say that the baby senses the stress, and that shapes the pathways in their brain. So the message is, our brain can change, and the people around us play a huge role in shaping that change. And there I'm getting a little closer to the question I asked you when we had the dog attack example. So now let's look at trauma and stress, and what actually happens in the brain and the body when we go through something overwhelming. Stress affects how the brain develops in children, young people, and adults. Early adversity changes the brain's chemistry, and that can make self-regulation and everyday functioning much harder in later life. There's another small video where the key player is introduced. It's our autonomic nervous system when we talk about stress and trauma. Let's have a look.
Over half of us have a chronic disorder such as high blood pressure or autoimmune disease. Rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addiction are skyrocketing. Why? The roots of these issues and more can often be traced to trauma, adverse childhood experiences, chronic stress, and ultimately, nervous system dysregulation. Meet your autonomic nervous system. Let's call it ANS. ANS takes care of a lot of your automatic functions, like your heartbeat, digestion, and body temperature. ANS also manages your survival and stress response, working to keep you alive when your life is in danger. ANS functions as our built-in detection system, constantly scanning our environment for cues of safety and cues of danger. As ANS scans the environment, it has 3 general responses or states. Safe. You feel calm, relaxed, and connected to those around you. Mobilize. When ANS detects danger, it sends a command and your heart rate and breathing increase. Adrenaline and cortisol are released, and blood rushes to your muscles so you can handle the threat. This is our fight-flight response. Immobilize. When ANS detects that the danger is so great that you can't fight or run, it shuts you down. In this state, our heart rate, blood pressure, and body temperature decrease, and pain-numbing endorphins are released. ANS does all of this automatically without us thinking about it. ANS doesn't just use these states for survival, it uses them to navigate through the world each day. When ANS functions well, it moves fluidly from one state to another, 1 minute mobilized and ready for action, and the next resting and recovering. ANS will often blend states together. When we play, ANS combines the mobilized and safe states. And when we're intimate with loved ones, it combines immobilized and safe states. When ANS can stay flexible and fluid like this, it helps us manage and become resilient to stress and negative events. We're able to bounce back and move on. Unfortunately, when we experience trauma and chronic stress, it can keep ANS from functioning in a healthy, regulated, and resilient way, and can keep us stuck in states of survival. A friendly get-together can become frightening. A simple meeting at work can become threatening. For those with a history of trauma and chronic stress, the ANS detection system often becomes faulty, constantly signaling danger even when we're safe. It's like ANS is an alarm system, constantly signaling fire even when there's no smoke and no flames. Consistently living in these survival states can be debilitating, and we often develop adaptive strategies like using drugs, alcohol, food, work, or sex in an attempt to bring regulation and temporary relief. Understanding how trauma impacts us is critically important. There is a whole spectrum of experiences that can be traumatizing and adversely impact ANS, like accidents, assaults, and natural disasters, which are often called shock traumas. There is also developmental or relational trauma, when we experience chronic adversity, abuse, neglect, and lack of safety while growing up. Many other experiences can be traumatizing, including chronic stress, medical procedures, and adverse community environments, like poverty, discrimination, and violence. Additionally, new research in epigenetics shows us that trauma can get passed down genetically at least 3 generations. In the past, we thought about trauma as events that happen to us. We now know that trauma is an experience, not an event. It's what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us. It's our response to the event rather than the event itself.
Okay. So in this video, we can very beautifully see how trauma and stress interact with each other in our brain and how it affects how we behave. Now, our autonomic nervous system determines how we react, whether we're calm, mobilized, or frozen. Trauma and chronic stress throw this system off balance, making it hypersensitive and constantly on alert. Our brain goes into some kind of survival mode. The more stress and triggers someone faces, the more their brain shifts toward panic. And as that happens, fewer parts of our brain stay available, especially the cortex, the part that's responsible for learning, for thinking, regulating emotions, making decisions. When the cortex goes offline, when it shuts down, people respond from reflex, not from choice. They can't learn, they cannot connect, they can't regulate or think clearly because the brain is focused on survival. Understanding this is crucial. People aren't choosing their reactions. Their nervous system is doing exactly what it was shaped to do, to keep them alive. So before we move on, let's take a short grounding moment together. If you like, just lower your gaze, close your eyes, look at the floor for a second, and maybe just listen to what I'm asking you. First, what's one idea or insight from this last part that stays with you? Second, what emotion or feeling do you notice in yourself right now? Even something very small. Maybe not a feeling, maybe a sensation. And third, what is one tiny action you might try in your work after today? Nothing big, just a small human step. You don't have to share any of this, just notice it for yourself. Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Can you please raise your hand if you've heard of ACEs before? Okay, yeah, a lot of people. If it's okay, like a small reminder, refreshing what it's like, okay. So when we talk about trauma and about understanding and mapping trauma, ACEs are often used as a framework. ACEs are negative or harmful experiences that happen before the age of 18. This idea comes from the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. It's a large retrospective study with more than 17,000 adults from the middle-class population, middle-aged, and it explored the link between negative experiences in childhood and the physical, mental, and social problems later in life. Participants were asked two things. How many difficult experiences did you have before age 18? And what physical or emotional health problems do you struggle with today? Things like asthma, diabetes, or cancer. Let's take a moment to have a quick look. It's a very short video on adverse childhood experiences. If it wants to work with me. Yes.
My parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting at me. And sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems at school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and mum's always crying, even with the tablets. I'm always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fads, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time, now I'm just angry. Doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my aces. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hurt half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Because I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16, pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer's probably on the way. I know all these kill you, but I could do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hate my kids. I hate their mum too, until she left, so my kids have grown up with aces. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from mum and dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and dad got help. The shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children, and I've got a job, most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ACE-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ACE-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced 1 ACE as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more ACEs. If we stop ACEs, millions of children would not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults would be cut in half. Fewer ACEs in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ACE aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters and most importantly parents. The more you know about ACEs, the more you can help stop children growing up with ACEs in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered ACEs, the more you know, the more you can help yourself and others who have suffered ACEs cope.
Okay, let's take a short moment to process this video, because it might bring up some feelings, memories, questions. And if you're ready, we can have a closer look at the results of the ACEs study. So the ACEs fall into 3 main categories: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. The researchers also looked at the risks in later in life. The results were striking. 2/3 of participants had at least 1 ACE. Almost 40% had 2 or more. And more than 20% had 3 or more ACEs. 1 on 8 had 4 or more ACEs. And once people reported 4 or more ACEs, their risk for heart disease, cancer, substance misuse, and other problems increased significantly. When participants had 6 or more ACEs, their life expectancy dropped by almost 20 years. The main conclusion was this: there is a direct linear relationship between the number of ACEs someone experiences and their long-term health and well-being. The higher your ACE score, the higher your risk for psychiatric, physical, and social problems in adulthood. And it's important to emphasize that it's not only about mental or physical illness. ACEs also impact our ability to connect with others, to build relationships, to feel safe with people, and to feel a sense of belonging. So ACEs give us a language and a framework to understand how early experiences can shape health across a lifetime. If you look at this table, you'll notice a clear pattern. Across almost all types of adverse childhood experiences, women report higher rates than men. The differences are especially visible in areas like sexual abuse, emotional neglect, and growing up in a household with mental health problems or substance use. This means that many women enter our services with a heavier load of early adversity. And that's important because these experiences shape how people cope, how they relate to others, and how they feel safe. So when we talk about trauma-informed care, this gender difference is something we need to keep in mind from the very start. Now let's talk about recovery. If our autonomic nervous system, our ANS, becomes dysregulated because of trauma or chronic stress, what can we actually do? How do we help the ANS become healthy, flexible, and resilient again? The good news is ANS can be retrained. We can learn to feel safe again. And the best way to do that is with the help of other people. And this is exactly what I asked you to think about earlier with the dog bite example. Healing happens through others, through safe and supportive relationships. Each of us has a unique nervous system, and our ANS is constantly communicating and scanning with the nervous systems of people around us. We automatically mirror their state. This is called co-regulation. You see the same thing in herd animals. If one animal senses danger, the whole group becomes alert. Their survival depends on that shared response. Humans work the same way. When we're around people who are stressed, who are angry, who are depressed, we feel worse. When we're around people who are calm, attuned, grounded, and emotionally present, we feel better. So connecting with safe, attuned people is one of the most powerful ways to support a healthy nervous system. This links back to what we discussed earlier. Both calm and dysregulation are contagious. That's co-regulation in action. Now, positive relationships can help recover from trauma, but they also can help prevent trauma from happening. Think back to the example of the dog attack. A child who is surrounded by care and support may not experience long-term harm, even after something frightening. Research shows that children who have strong, supportive relationships usually don't show significant negative outcomes until they've had 4 or 5 ACEs. But the opposite is also true. If a child grows up without support, without connection, they're already at higher risk, even without any ACEs. So if we want to help children, young people, adults who are going through difficult or painful experiences, or in addiction care, mental health care, social services, we have to build safe, stable, supportive networks around them. Positive relationships protect against negative experiences, and the calm nervous system is contagious. Okay. Additionally, I would shortly like to talk to you about 2 key books and frameworks that are really important when we think of recovery from trauma. The first one is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps a Score. It really brings to light how central our body is, not just in experiencing trauma, but also in the process of recovering it. We don't have time to unpack it in this whole, but I'm sure you will be able to receive the slides or you can take a picture. But it's a really important book if you want to understand the role of the body in recovery from trauma. And the second cornerstone of trauma recovery I would like to share with you comes from another foundational book, Judith Herman's Trauma and Recovery. While van der Kolk emphasizes the body, Herman brings our attention to something equally essential: relationships. She reminds us that trauma, especially complex and developmental trauma, is fundamentally a relational experience. It often happens in relationships marked by betrayal, by neglect, or by abuse. This relational perspective is very powerful because it helps us understand just how important the therapeutic relationship is, not as an add-on, but as the core of the healing process. Because trauma happens in relations, healing also has to happen in relationships. Okay, that being said, you already saw it briefly in the last video clip. The link between trauma and substance use is very real. Let's start with a bit of prevalence. Research shows that around 85 to 92% of people in drug treatment programs have experienced at least one traumatic event in their lives. And within that group, about 36% meet the criteria of PTSD. And when we zoom in on women, the picture becomes even clearer and honestly even more urgent. For women, these patterns are not only more common, they also take on different shape. We know that gender differences show up in trauma exposure. Women report higher rates of intimate partner violence and sexual assault, while men are more likely to experience physical assault or witness violence. Both men and women show high rates of childhood violence abuse and exposure to violence at home. But what really stands out is the impact. Women are more likely to fall into the category of severe trauma symptoms. Their reactions to traumatic events tend to be more intense and more persistent. And these experiences don't just affect the mind, they are embodied. Trauma shapes a woman's sense of safety in the world, her sense of control, and even her relationship with her body. So when we're working with women, we're not just addressing a set of symptoms, we're working with experiences that have touched every layer of their being, physical, emotional, psychological, and relational. That's why a gender-responsive lens in treating women is so important. Now, the relationship between trauma and addiction is a bit like the classic chicken or egg discussion. I'm sure you've heard of this before. What comes first? Trauma and then substance use, or substance use and then trauma. On the one hand, people who are struggling with addiction often encounter more traumatic experiences. One possible explanation is that substance use can impair your judgment. When your ability to assess risk is affected, you're more likely to end up in a dangerous or a risky or an unpredictable situations where trauma is more likely to occur. On the other hand, people who live through a traumatic event are at greater risk for substance uses. And that makes sense. Drugs or alcohol can become like a sort of a coping strategy, something that helps you get through the day or helps you deal with the emotional or psychological and physical aftermath of trauma. And they are also very much, a lot of the times caught up in a vicious circle of trauma and substance use. Of course, not everyone who experiences trauma will develop a substance use disorder. There are many factors that shape a person's level of risk, things like genetics, someone's environment. And there are also supportive factors or protective factors, like individual qualities, like optimism or resilience, supportive environments, and this is really hope-giving. So it's never just one thing. It's a combination of risks and protection in a person's life that shapes how they cope and how their stories unfold. Now let's take a moment to talk specifically about trauma in correctional settings, but I'm not sure if this is interesting for you. So people who would like to talk, I'm just looking at the timekeeping. Maybe very shortly. So the reality is that many people who end up committing crimes were themselves victims long before they became offenders. A very large proportion grew up with abuse, and women report disproportionately high levels of physical and mental health problems. To give you one example, in England, 65% of incarcerated women have been diagnosed with depression, compared with 37% of men. And women account for almost a quarter of all self-harm incidents in prison, whereas they are making up just 5% of the total prison population. This tells us something about the level of suffering present among women. Of course, it's really important to be clear about one thing. Looking at criminal behavior through the lens of trauma is not an excuse. We're not excusing, we're not minimizing harm. It doesn't remove accountability. What it does do is deepen our understanding of how criminal behavior develops. And that understanding helps us design interventions that reduce reoffending and support successful reintegration in society. When we understand the why, we can better influence the what's next. Okay, the link between trauma and offending. Exposure to violence and trauma has a profound impact on a person's daily functioning, relationships, and mental and physical health. And the coping strategies people develop, like substance use, aggression, emotional numbing, can increase the likelihood of criminal behavior. We also know that the severity of PTSD is positively linked to the number of arrests, and PTSD significantly increases the risk of recidivism among formerly incarcerated people. Recognizing trauma in this population is essential because for many people, prisons don't just fail to heal trauma, they can actually add to it. They can re-traumatize. Traumatic events can and do happen inside correctional facilities, and simply being incarcerated can trigger memories of past trauma or mirror aspects of previous abuse. In these cases, imprisonment can worsen PTSD symptoms. Now, the triggers within correctional environments or correctional settings are very important. It's not it's a challenge actually, because inside a prison, PTSD symptoms can be triggered by the environment itself. Bright light, loud noises, alarms, shouting, body searches, physical restraints, locked doors or an open door policy, isolation and crowded living spaces, all of these can act as triggers. Most correctional facilities are designed around strict control and rigid structures, which is understandable from a safety point of view. But when these procedures don't take trauma into account, they can unintentionally re-traumatize people who have no way to escape or avoid these triggers. Now, it's a huge challenge, of course, for individuals and for staff in prison working with these PTSD symptoms. This is why trauma-informed or even trauma-aware approaches are so crucial. They help reduce harm, they improve safety, and support rehabilitation. Now let's take a tiny reset moment. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and stand up for a quick stretch, just to wake the body a bit. I'm already standing up, but you can just move, like stretch your arms. And while you're standing, think of one situation in your work where you later thought, maybe I could have handled that situation differently. So when you're stretching, just for yourself, think of how you could have responded differently there. Just take something to drink, if you like. People are not made to listen for 2 hours. Do we need a quick break for like 5 minutes to go to the bathroom? I see some doubt. Maybe 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, let's continue. So, that brings us to the last part, trauma-informed care. Before we move on to very specific tools and tips on trauma-informed care, it's important to make a distinction between trauma-informed care and trauma-specific care or services. Trauma-informed care is really the foundation of everything. It shapes the whole system. It's about clients, it's about staff, it's about the organization or the service. And the core principles are being trauma-aware, creating safety and trust, offering choice and collaboration, and helping people build on their strengths and their skills. It's for all patients, for all residents, and for all clients. So we are looking at the connection for everyone who comes in the system. We're looking at the connection between trauma, mental and physical pain, and substance use. For everyone who enters the system, we are going to try to identify trauma symptoms and coping strategies. And for everyone getting into the system, we are looking how we can offer support and practical strategies that increase safety and help people stay connected to these services. That's the trauma-informed approach. Now, what are trauma-specific services? They go a step further. They are actual therapeutic interventions designed to treat trauma directly. They're delivered by professionals with specialized training, and they take place within a trauma-informed environment. Think about programs like Seeking Safety, TREM, Atrium, etc. I think I'll skip this. Before we dive into the core principles of trauma-informed care, I want to give you a tiny moment just for yourselves. Take your pen, write down, or take your cell phone and note in your notes One thing you already do in your daily work that feels trauma-informed. Even if you never called it that way, something small, something human, something you do naturally. You don't have to share it, this is just for you. So what do you already do that feels trauma-informed? Okay. Now I'd like to walk you through the 4 core principles of trauma-informed care. These principles shape the way we work, the way we relate to clients, and the way we design our services. First of all, trauma awareness. A trauma-informed approach starts with awareness. Awareness among staff and clients that trauma is common and that its impact can shape a person's entire development, and that people use many different strategies to cope or survive. It also means understanding the strong links between trauma, mental health, substance use, and physical health. This shared awareness creates a foundation. It helps us see behaviors through a different lens, not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you. And how have you learned to cope? The second principle is an emphasis on safety and trust. That's absolutely central in trauma-informed care. People with trauma histories often feel unsafe in their bodies, in relationships, or in their environment. Many have experienced abuse of power or may still be living in unsafe situations. Safety and trust are built through very concrete practices, a welcoming intake process, a physical environment that feels less intimidating, clear information about what to expect, and informed consent. And safety isn't only for clients, staff need it as well. In trauma-exposed work, helpers can experience vicarious trauma or burnout. Even if staff haven't lived through trauma themselves, they can still be triggered by the intensity of clients' stories or behaviors. That's why trauma-informed services invest in staff training, clinical supervision, and policies that support self-care and emotional well-being. The third one is choice, collaboration, and connection. Trauma often involves a loss of control, a loss of voice, or relationships that were unsafe. So trauma-informed approaches, services, try to restore these experiences. We communicate openly. We try to reduce power imbalance. We try to allow clients to express emotions without fear or judgment. We offer real choices in treatment, and we make decisions together. Connection is also a big part of healing. Safe relationships with staff, with family, with peers, and with the wider community can be deeply restorative. And this principle often extends to involving clients in evaluation services and participating in advisory groups so that they have a say in how programs are designed or improved. And the last principle is a strengths-based and skills-based principle. Clients are supported to recognize their own strengths and to grow their resilience and coping tools. Staff can model and teach practical skills, like noticing triggers, like calming the body, like grounding in the present moment, and managing overwhelming emotions. And again, this applies to staff as well. Workers also need the skills, the support, and the organizational culture that make trauma-informed care sustainable. Together, these 4 principles create environments where healing is possible, not by focusing only on symptoms, but by transforming the way we relate, the way we organize, and the way we understand human behavior. Something that's really important to emphasize is that trauma-informed practice is not a method or a program. It's not a checklist. It's a mindset. It's a ground attitude. It's a basic stance. Everyone is part of it: clients, support staff, practitioners, officers, administrative workers, maintenance staff, managers. Every single person in the system plays a role. It means working in a way that shows real understanding of what people with trauma histories need in order to feel safe, respected, and able to participate. What does that look like in practice? It looks like listening, genuinely listening, in a way that's open, that's curious, and non-judgmental. It means meeting people without assumptions, without labels, without rushing to conclusions. It also means being strengths-based in the simple everyday moment, saying hello kindly, not shaming or blaming, paying attention to your tone of voice and your body language, asking how you are in a way that communicates that you actually want to know. It can be as simple as naming what you observe. You look distressed, or I notice you seem overwhelmed right now. And then acknowledging the feeling behind it. These small things matter. In fact, these small things are trauma-informed practice. They shape the relational environment that makes healing and regulation possible. So trauma-informed care isn't something we do occasionally. It's how we show up consistently across every interaction. And in the next part, we'll offer a few practical tools, small but meaningful things that you can start applying in your everyday work. But first, maybe a very quick moment with the person sitting next to you, or behind you, or in front of you, doesn't matter. Just turn to them and share this one thing. Which trauma-informed attitude is the hardest for you to keep on busy, challenging days? It's only about 1 or 2 minutes. But which part of trauma-informed care, trauma-informed practice, is the hardest part to do for you when it gets challenging? Do you need the other slide again? Yeah. This one? Okay, thank you. Right. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a few concrete tips and tools, things, simple things that you can take back to your daily practice, working with women or in general, people, humans. My hope is that these ideas don't just stay in this room, but that they inspire you in the work you do every day. Because trauma-informed practice isn't about perfection. It's about small, intentional moments that help people feel safer, calmer, and more human. So as we go through these tips, think about what might fit naturally into your way of working, what you can try tomorrow or even later today. Sometimes the smallest shifts make the biggest difference. Let's look at a few practical tips. Let's start with the tips around communication, because the way we speak to people and the way we listen can make an enormous difference in how safe people feel. First of all, shift the lens from judgment to curiosity. One of the most powerful changes we can make is in the questions we ask. Instead of, I've already said this, what's wrong with you, which can feel blaming or shaming, try asking, what happened to you? This simple shift invites people into a safer space where their experience and reactions make sense. It tells them you're not the problem, something happened that shaped you. And when someone is distressed, a gentle observation can open the door. Something like, I notice you really look upset. Would you like to talk? Or many people here have been through really difficult experiences. You're not alone, and we have people that can support you. Small words, big impact. Another important piece is the language we use. Try to name things in a way that reflects understanding, not judgment. Instead of talking about symptoms, think of them as adaptations a person has. Instead of saying something is attention-seeking, think of it as trying to connect in the only way these people know. Instead of calling someone manipulative, recognize that they may struggle to ask directly for what they need. And instead of saying it's a performance, seeing it as someone is reaching out for help in a way that feels safe to them. The words we choose shape how people feel and how they heal. Well, let's try something very simple. We're just going to sit in silence for 10 seconds. Nothing special. Just notice what happens in your body. Here we go. Okay, now imagine giving those same 10 seconds to someone who is overwhelmed or upset. How would that change the moment? Something else on communication. Create space for the person's story. Use simple, open questions and allow silence. Silence gives people room to speak in their own way at their own pace. Ask how someone is really doing instead of the polite version. And don't only focus on ticking off treatment goals. Pay attention to what's happening in the here and now. Sometimes responding to the moment someone is in is far more important than working through the checklist. Acknowledge and normalize emotions. When someone is feeling or is dealing with fear, guilt, shame, or deep sadness, name those feelings gently. Let them know those emotions are human, they're understandable, and nothing to be ashamed of. By doing that, you're normalizing the emotional experience and giving it legitimacy. And remember, tone matters. Your voice, your volume, your non-verbal cues, they communicate safety more than the words themselves. And then lastly, build connection through presence and respect. Offer regular, informal contact moments. You don't always need a formal session to be supportive. Sometimes a quick check-in builds more trust than a full appointment. Listen actively and without judgment. Show genuine interest in a person's story, their fears, their dreams, and the networks around them. Use I statements like, I'm sensing that this feels overwhelming for you. Or I want to understand what this moment feels like for you. It shows responsibility for your own perspective and keeps communication at the same time open and respectful. These communication practices might seem very small, but they're incredibly powerful. Now let's look at a few practical tips around behavior. The things we do that can help someone feel safer, calmer, or more connected, more respected. First of all, regulate yourself to help regulate others. One of the most powerful tools you have is your own calmness. When someone feels threatened, overwhelmed, or disconnected, your steadiness, your calmness can help bring them back down. Remember, calm creates calm. Speak slowly, move gently, be predictable. Always explain what you're about to do before you do it so that no one gets ever surprised. Sometimes even modeling slow, deep breathing can help someone regulate without you having to say a word. When we understand the signs of ACEs and trauma, it becomes much easier to respond with empathy rather than emotions. And from that place, compassion naturally comes in. Let's take a very short pause here. We've just talked about regulations, how your reactions have shaped the interaction. So I'd like to invite you a tiny moment of quiet reflection. If you want, just soften your gaze for a second. Think of one behavior or situation in your work that tends to trigger you. Something that makes you tense up, that makes you withdraw, or react more sharply than you'd like. You don't have to analyze it, you don't have to share it, just notice it. What triggers you? Okay, awareness is already a big step. Okay. Another important thing is offer small acts of grounding and comfort. Small gestures can have a big impact on a dysregulated nervous system. You can offer a glass of water or a cup of tea, invite the person to sit down, or instead, if sitting feels too vulnerable, invite them to stand up. Sometimes it helps to step outside for a moment or move to a quieter place. Just changing the environment can shift someone's state. Give people time and space to center themselves rather than rushing them or pushing for answers. That pause can be incredibly regulating. Touch can be very triggering for some people. So if you ever need to touch someone, even lightly, always say it first. Never touch without warning. And then support choices and autonomy through your actions. Everything you do should communicate you have options. You have agency. You are not being controlled. Offer invitations instead of commands. Would you like to sit? Or shall we go to a quieter room? Would a break help? What do you think? Again, these aren't big or complicated interventions. They're small human gestures, grounded, steady, and respectful. And they can change how someone experiences the moment or the interaction or the environment. Let's move on to a third set of practical tools on informing and debriefing someone. First of all, it's important to be clear, transparent, and predictable. Trauma survivors often feel unsafe when things are unclear or unpredictable. So one of the most important things that you have to do, regulate. Where was I? Be clear, transparent, yes. Okay. So one of the most important things that you have to do is provide clear information, but also keep it manageable. Offer information in small pieces and not all at once. Always work with informed consent. People need to know what will happen, why it's happening, and what choices they have. Predictability is key, like I said before. Be clear about what you expect from the client and what they can expect from you. And keep your promises, of course. Consistency builds trust. Then combine care with boundaries. An effective correctional officer or any frontline worker really is someone who genuinely cares and looks outward to everyone. Someone motivated by the well-being of the people. But caring doesn't mean having no boundaries. It means having clear, healthy boundaries that provide structure and safety. Flexibility is possible, but the limits need to be known by staff, by clients. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're part of what makes the environment feel safe and predictable. Then, of course, debrief after incidents to repair and restore your relationship and their trust. Debriefing is incredibly important. It supports recovery. It helps the person make sense of what happened, and it strengthens the relationship between staff and clients. Debriefing also creates space for learning for the client and for the staff. It communicates we're not just moving on and forgetting about it, we're trying to understand it together. This is a powerful tool for healing. Again, these are small changes, small gestures that can impact a person's feeling safe. Let's look at one more important area, how we welcome a new patient, a new client, a new resident, someone in our service. The first moments of contact can make an enormous difference in how someone experiences the entire service. Make the intake personal and unrushed. A trauma-informed welcome starts with taking time. Don't rush the intake. Don't treat it like a box-ticking exercise. Every person deserves an individual welcome where we slow down enough to see them, hear them, and help them orient themselves. Those early moments set the tone. If someone arrives feeling confused, frightened, or overwhelmed, as many people do, our calm, respectful approach can start building safety right from the start. Start in a space that feels human, not threatening. Traditionally, when women arrive in a prison or a facility or a service, they were placed in a holding room, a bare space full of posters about fire alarms, violence reporting, drug warnings, disciplinary rules. It's essentially a room full of negative messages. We should try to avoid that. Instead of going straight into that harsh environment, new arrivals now spend their first night of first moments in a transition room. It's a warmer space with pictures, color, and a more human feeling. A small change, but it sends a powerful message. You are not just an offender entering the system. You are a person arriving here, and we see you. These early steps, right from the start that someone enters a service, slowing down, welcoming individually, paying attention to the physical environment, set the tone for everything that follows. Another important practical tool in trauma-informed work is creating a safety plan for every client or patient. A personalized safety plan, of course, not a one-size-fits-all response. A key question we can ask is, what does physical and emotional safety mean for you? And also, when you lose control, when you feel overwhelmed, what is the best way for us to support you? And we're not looking for standard responses. We're looking at what specifically for this person helps. It creates safety for these people themselves and for you as a staff. Identify triggers and early warning signs. Work together to identify what activates this stress. This can be very concrete and very practical. Ask things like, is there anything in this room right now that feels difficult for you to tolerate? You'll be surprised. People often identify triggers that we don't even think of. So the goal is to understand what sets off fear, panic, anger, or dissociation so we can respond early and prevent escalation. Then also build a toolkit of coping and self-regulation strategies. Here again, not a one-size-fits-all approach, but what helps this person, this individual specific person. It's not just for crisis management, it's also for crisis prevention. Help clients identify grounding tools, breathing, exercising, or other self-soothing strategies that work for them. When every client has a safety plan, we're not just reacting to crisis, we're building a pathway for them for safety, choice, and regulation, long before the crisis even arrives. And then the physical and the physical environment, also a very important thing when we want to work trauma-informed. Make the environment feel less threatening and more human. Physical spaces should help regulate the nervous system, not activate it. So think about how can you make the rooms feel softer, warmer, and more welcoming. For example, in a reception area, instead of harsh lighting and bare walls, imagine this: flowers, soft colors, soft furnishing, pictures of artwork, quotes or a welcome sign in multiple languages. Screens with calming information, adjustable lighting and volume on TV and announcements, no bars inside, even simple things like quotes on the wall: accept what is, let go of what was, have faith in what will be, can send messages of hope and grounding. An especially powerful idea: share stories of success of women who have entered and left the service. And then, of course, use nature and outdoor space to support calmness and connection. The environment outside matters just as much. Trees, gardens, open spaces, they can have an enormous impact on emotional regulation. So the physical environment is not just decoration, it's an active part of trauma-informed care. It can either trigger fear or cultivate calmness. And with small intentional changes, we can make spaces that help people feel safe enough to heal and move forward. Now, another important issue is client involvement, giving people a real voice in their environment, in their routines, and in their own goals. Involve clients in shaping the space and the services. And this is the quote: "Nothing for us or about us without us." Some facilities invite women to be part of the design of the buildings and interiors. They are sitting in these design committees together with staff and with architects. They're given a blank page, asked, how would you create a space that feels safe for you? When women help shape the environment, it becomes more human, more supportive, and more meaningful. Participation can be informal as well, of course. They don't have to have design committees. But also involve clients in decisions about daily life and their own treatment. Giving people choice and agency is a key part of healing from trauma. So invite clients to contribute to decisions such as what activities are offered, how tasks are divided, how the daily structure is organized, what therapy sessions can we organize, what meal choices are there, and most importantly, we have to ask women to set their own goals. And then finally, we can't talk about trauma-informed work without talking about staff care. Because if we want trauma-informed environments, we need trauma-informed teams. Invest, so this is for the managers here present, or take it with you to tell your manager. Invest in trauma-informed training for everyone. Training is essential for all staff and even for clients. For staff, good trauma-informed training increases understanding, insight, and foresight. It helps people make sense of behaviors, anticipate needs, and understand the lived experiences of the women they work with. For clients, training is also important. It often boosts self-confidence and self-worth. When they learn about trauma, when they learn about the brain, about coping mechanisms and ACEs, they begin to understand themselves differently, with more compassion and less shame. But we also have to build systems of support, formally as well as informally. Staff need spaces to process what they hear and see. That's where intervision or peer support becomes essential. This can be formal, scheduled meetings, structured reflection, or informal, quick check-ins, a supportive conversation in the hallway. And of course, encourage staff to care for their own well-being. People working in trauma-heavy environments must pay attention to 3 things: being aware of their own needs, their own emotions, and their own boundaries, maintaining balance between work, rest, and personal life, and nurturing connection with yourself, with your colleagues, with people you love, and with something larger, community. So caring for staff is not optional. It's the backbone of trauma-informed practice. When staff feel safe, supported, and regulated. They're far better equipped to create safety and support for the people they care for. Before we wrap up completely, I'd love to give you one final moment just for yourself. You've heard a lot of ideas, tools, practical tips today. Take a few seconds and write down one small thing you want to take with you into your work. Something you want to try, something you want to remember, you want to pay attention to tomorrow. Just one thing. And you don't have to share it with anyone. Okay. So to wrap up, I want to leave you with 3 simple ideas. First, trauma, stress, the brain, the body, and substance use are deeply interconnected. You can't look at one without understanding the other. Second, trauma-informed care is not a technique, it's a mindset. It's a way of being. It's a shared attitude for staff and for clients, woven into everyday small actions. And third, you can make a difference in 10 minutes. Oh, excuse me. Don't know what happened. There goes my ending. So you can make a difference in 10 minutes, truly. It doesn't always take a big program or a more major structural issue. You can make a difference in 10 minutes. Just being present, just listening, genuinely listening, and recognizing, acknowledging the person in front of you. Okay, thank you for listening. I really hope that you have learned or taken up on something, also if it was just one thing, that you can use in your day-to-day work. And I will leave you.
We've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
For questions.
Okay. Are there questions or thoughts?
Thank you very much. It was very informative. And I was wondering whether you could provide any more stuff for us to read. You cited 2 books, and I was wondering first if you want to do more of a deep dive.
Yes.
If there are any books or any in particular, I'm teaching at the university. I'm teaching nursing students. This is something that I would love to grade more into our teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So, if there are any books other than the 2 of those that you
Yes, yes. One of your co-listeners has very interesting books to share as well. Pete Walker, I just heard it. So I'm very interested and eager in learning of themselves. I can send you a list if you want to. I have some, not only books, but also articles that may be interesting. So you can just give me your contact details and I'll email you the references. Okay? Yes, of course. To everyone, or yeah? Yeah, that would be interesting, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes. The book, yes, Pete Walker, yeah. I will write it down. Okay.
Einhverjum sem ekki skráði sig sem vill láta senda á sig? Við erum með netfang hjá öllum sem skráði sig en ekki hjá öðrum. Okay.
Okay.
Jú. Það bara Júli.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I thought you were going to say something. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Yes.
We will work on this. We will continue to work on this.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
We will.